All right. Well, thanks guys for joining me today. I'm excited to answer any and all questions you have about my Deloitte Consulting experience, and maybe I'll kick it off just by sharing a little bit about like when I was working there, what I worked on, and sort of what that was like. And then this is kind of your time to ask any and all questions, and hopefully it can be helpful. So I worked at Deloitte from 2008 to 2012. So I graduated undergrad in 08. When I was a senior, I had a friend of mine who was a year older, Mike Schuler, who was also a comp sci major, worked at Deloitte. He came back senior year, did a kind of in-classroom presentation in September, basically said, "Yo, Malloy, you should apply to Deloitte. It's pretty cool." And I was like, "What's a Deloitte?" I did not know much about the big consulting firms, but I was like, "All right, Schuler said it's cool. I'll check it out." And so applied senior year. I got a job offer on Halloween. So I knew by Halloween that I had a job after graduation. Was pretty stoked about it. Came back down to DC to work in the federal practice. Started that summer, had like a month of orientation and training down in, I think we went to Scottsdale, Arizona for 2 weeks. And then I went to Disney World for the first time, which is pretty cool, on the company dime, and got trained up on how to be a business technology analyst. And so one of the things that Deloitte talked a lot about was like, there wasn't a product that we were selling, it was the people. So they invest a lot of time and energy resources in training the people, and they weren't looking to hire folks who already knew how to be a consultant and solve all these problems, but folks who knew how to learn and then solve problems based on what they were learning. I loved working at the firm. I spent the first year on like an internal project doing kind of solicitation, RFPs and things for the Department of Defense. It was not the most strenuous work, to be honest with you. I was kind of easing my way into the real world and figuring it out. And then I spent the next three and a half years working for the FDIC, doing failed bank closings. And so this was 2008 to 2012. A lot of banks closed. We were not the show up Friday at 5 team. We were the show up 6 months later and extract all of the data so we could put it into databases for the FDIC, because part of the FDIC insurance thing is like, if a bank fails, we'll save 10 years of loan records and all the payments and origination, all these things. So if there's any lawsuit about it, we would kind of put the data together, upload it into literally trillions of records for all these banks. I know we did at least several hundred while I was there. And I think I started in May of 2009 on this project, and then we go down to Sarasota, Florida. And so one thing to note with Deloitte and with a lot of the big consulting firms is that a lot of them, certainly pre-COVID, I don't know for sure what post-COVID is like, but was the Monday morning fly out, work on the client site till Thursday afternoon, and then you fly home. And so I did that for 3 weeks, went down to Sarasota, Florida. It was beautiful, and I hated it. And it literally, like, I was like, this is terrible. Like, I have a life in DC. I wanted to play kickball on Tuesday nights. I was playing Frisbee. I had friends I want to hang out with. I was like, I am not a suitcase in a hotel room all week kind of guy. And so luckily I was able to talk to my manager and stay local for the next 3 years in, technically I was out of like the downtown G Street office and then the Roslyn office right over the bridge from Georgetown. But I worked at a client site, which was actually a Lockheed Martin building up in Rockville. And so I had a reverse commute. I was living in Georgetown, right by Jetty's, west of campus, would drive up to Rockville about a half hour or so, and then work at Lockheed. Lockheed was the prime contractor. Deloitte was a subcontractor. The client was the FDIC. But I worked with a few other Deloitte folks and like dozens of Lockheed folks in this building, where I was kind of the project manager for several bank teams. Like I might be overseeing 6 to 8 banks on a given week, that we had 3 to 5 employees in that city at that bank extracting all of the loan stuff. But I didn't have to do any traveling, which was great because I didn't want to. And I also then, that by January of 2010, started my master's at Georgetown. And that was another thing. Well, I wanted to learn computer science, wanted to, be involved at Georgetown, but it also meant I couldn't travel because I had grad classes during the week that I had to go to in person. And so I can dive into a lot more details about what the work was like, the skills I learned, other things, but Will and Alan, like what questions do you guys have for me, and how can I be most useful?
I sent over a few questions last week. I'm not sure if you got a chance to see the email.
I did. Let me just
Um,
pull them up though. And what's the first one off the top?
one question I had is I'm also majoring in computer science, doubling with economics. And I was curious how you felt, if at all, that you leveraged your computer science degree in both the hiring process, but also once you got to Deloitte, if you felt that a lot of it transferred, or I know you were talking about Deloitte puts a lot of time and emphasis on teaching and educating their employees.
Yeah, great question. So I definitely thought that I was going to be hired or like I would work on kind of like here, just pulling up the email, like large software engineering type projects or data architecture, or like working on a team um, with other folks. Uh, that was not really the case. And so I think the computer science skills were helpful in the interview and like, hey, I've got this computer science background. I don't think I had like a technical component of the interview where like I had to write code for something like that wasn't necessarily part of it. I did talk about like how I worked with my lab partner to kind of show that me and Mike Forget could work on it as a team and solve problems and late nights in the computer lab, being able to collaborate. Um, I also found that I had the unique ability to like understand the computer science and
Mhm.
speak English to humans in social interactions. And so I
Yeah.
think that ability is very useful, both in terms of getting the job as well as in the role. Um, and in my actual role as a kind of project manager, I didn't do any of the like writing scripts to pull out this complicated loan data. I did quality assurance checks. I did a lot of Excel and PowerPoint, which ironically were not things I learned at all in
Mhm.
undergrad. But like how to design presentations, and I am very OCD about like an extra space in between words, or there shouldn't be a bullet on the period on the end of a bullet point, or things like that.
Mhm.
Like, that's Deloitte training for sure, because my manager or partner would kind of notice, hey, we got to fix this up. Um, and I also think that the ability to kind of demonstrate that, hey, I can learn new technologies and like I understand the algorithms for a sort, but like I don't have to have memorized the syntax for doing it in Java and JavaScript and C and Python, all these things, but I understand it's almost like a lattice of different mental models,
Mhm.
which I would highly recommend as like a lifelong learning thing of how to look at different problems through different lenses. Another skill that I found to be invaluable that wasn't computer science related was to let people bitch at me and smile and nod and empathize and be like, oh, I'm so sorry that the bank team sent the data. I can't believe that, that they forgot to do it that way. Oh, I'll talk to them. I'm sorry I had to deal with that. Thank you so much for, spending 5 minutes to fix the thing. And then I'd go to the bank team and they'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe they're complaining about that again. Come on. I know it's so hard. I'm sorry you have to deal with that. And like, I was the intermediary who could smile and nod and like, they weren't yelling at me. They were just frustrated with some of the things and try to translate that communication sometimes between the technical stakeholders and the business stakeholders. And so, the technical people may not speak business or like understand how this, drives revenue or impacts the bottom line. But if you can help kind of translate those things and in some cases, like know what the vocab words are without necessarily having to do all of the things, but just understanding how to use it in a sentence to have a like
Mhm.
moderately intelligent conversation. What part of your question will did I not answer? Can I add more to?
Um, I would say you touched on most of it. You kind of gave examples of the professional development. Um, obviously, I know you think you had mentioned this when we talked before. You pursued your MBA through Deloitte. Is that correct?
My master's in computer science, but yeah, through Deloitte
Sorry,
and
not MBA, master's.
yep,
Um,
yeah,
I guess outside of that, but also in addition to that, do you feel that Deloitte really supported your efforts to further develop yourself, learn new skills, kind of push yourself while there?
definitely. I think they are big fans of the growth mindset, and there's a requirement each year too to do 40 hours of CED, which is continuing education and development. So they have their own like Deloitte University online training programs. You can take courses there. There's external stuff. Yeah, but they definitely supported that. And I went through an NTAP program, which is the National Tuition Assistance Program, where they helped pay for about half of Georgetown, very thankfully. And they also had like a GSAP, which was maybe graduate student assistance program. And that was you take off Deloitte fully and go full-time to grad school, whereas I kept working full-time and just took night classes, like 2 classes a semester for 2.5 years.
I don't want to dominate the entire call if you have any questions, Alan.
Yeah, sure. I had a question, I guess. Well, consulting isn't like a thing that a lot of people like do for life, I guess. So,
Fair.
talking about like everything you've done after Deloitte, what's like, I guess the best like takeaways, like non-technical best takeaways that you like applied to everything after you did at Deloitte?
That is a great question. And so, guys, give me 1 second. Actually, my wife is just texting me from upstairs. I will be right back.
No worries.
And so, Alan, you asking about kind of like the skills from Deloitte that were useful afterwards. And, I think when I graduated in 2008, Deloitte was the #1 place to launch your career. And the key word in that sentence was launch. It wasn't to spend 40 years. And I loved the 4 years there. I learned a ton about business. Like I was a comp sci guy in the computer lab. I didn't take any of the business school classes. I didn't know accounting, finance, OPM, whatever all the other acronyms are. And so like learning how to be in a business environment, how to be in meetings, like a lot of the curriculum in the startup internship seminar comes from things I learned from Deloitte. Back in my day, we didn't have Zoom, we had conference calls. And like I was on the recruiting team for University of Maryland, and then ultimately like led the entire University of Maryland recruitment team. And that was like a firm activity. Think of it like an extracurricular. And by doing that, I learned how to lead conference calls and be like, hi, who just joined? Hi, who just joined? Like how to send out meeting invites with the agenda and like prepare the slides and send them out afterwards. These are things that are, useful, and I kind of take for granted that I know how to do them at this point in my career. And the other thing that I'll mention too is like, while I was at Deloitte, it gave me the financial security to both go to grad school and to start a social enterprise sunglass company while I was in grad school. And so I did that for a year on nights and weekends while still getting a Deloitte paycheck, being able to save some money. And I graduated Georgetown in May of 2012. I put in my 6-week notice at Deloitte and finished by June 15th. And I moved to the beach in Delaware to sell sunglasses. And that was not the career path that mom and dad or most folks thought made a lot of sense as I transitioned out of DC and in that high paying consulting gig. But that was a bet on myself. And like the math to me was like, I think I started at 65 and was up to a little over 80K a year when I left. And then by leaving, I thought I took the ceiling off that, that I could now earn well over 100,000 or a lot more than that as a CEO and entrepreneur. Ultimately, I went bankrupt 5 years later, and like it didn't work out. But I learned a lot through the process as well. I will also say that like having the Deloitte logo on my resume, or if I was to make a pitch deck for a new company to go raise money and say, hey, I worked at Deloitte, like there is some social proof, some credibility that comes, whether it's a Deloitte, McKinsey. I met with a 2016 Georgetown alum earlier today who worked at Accenture for 4.5 years and just quit on Friday because she's been working on her own line of like women athletic clothing, and again, having that reliable income where your basic needs, food, water, shelter, rent, cell phone bills are paid for makes it much easier after graduation to explore entrepreneurial things. I didn't get a paycheck for like 4 years when I was running the sunglass company. And so when I winded it down and then I landed at Halcyon, I spent 5 years as the program coordinator, program manager, program director running this incubator program, and was able to use a lot of the things I learned at Deloitte, including the how to smile and nod while people complain about stuff. And interestingly enough, Halcyon also had a partnership with Deloitte where each of our entrepreneurs got a Deloitte consultant. And so like I got to interact with, we call it, colleagues for life. Like I left on good terms. I still have a lot of friends who are there, and also friends who have scattered to the wind. I think when I joined the firm,
The monitor as an experiment.
Okay. That sounds good. I think there were about 40 of us who graduated in 2008 that all joined at the same time. Maybe 5 or 8 are still there, but it was a nice peer group as like a 22-year-old in DC. Like we played kickball together on Tuesday nights. But whatever you do in life, join a kickball league when you're 20 and single. We had 12 people get married from my kickball team. Including a Boston College friend that's a woman, and a Deloitte guy who I take full credit for that introduction via Tuesday night at Kelly's Irish Times. So and there's some value there too of like joining an organization that has people around your age, that you can learn and grow with and have fun with on the weekends as well. And another interesting thing about Deloitte was like, of the 40 of us, we were all type A. We all like to like organize and get stuff done, and we're used to being the smartest, or at least one of the smartest people in the classroom. And when you filled it with 40 of us that were all used to being that, it was an interesting dynamic where we were all really smart, even though we went to different schools. And I'd say that in a positive way. And there is a level of like competition, or like, I'm doing this, like how am I keeping up with, the other folks. Alan,
Did you ever?
Yeah, well, what you got?
Sorry.
Well, actually, Alan, let me ask first. Did that help answer all your questions? Was there anything that I can add more to that?
Yeah, I think that answered most.
I was gonna say, did you ever think about pursuing a more software technical career?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so, in fact, I went to grad school at Georgetown in computer science because I wanted to be a software engineer. Like I wanted to work on large scale data projects, not data, like technology. Like I wanted to build, at the root level, like I want to make video games. Like as a kid, I always loved video games. I wanted to like design them. At some point it turned into like, I wanted to design the user interface that you saw on TV when people were like typing on the keyboard and all this cool stuff, but I didn't want to design the backend. That wasn't that interesting to me. I also learned too that like I was really bad at setting up the environment, like the Java environment and the code and the way you would connect the stuff. So like actually execute the program, I could solve the problems. I could like write the code and like was very good at that, and even liked documentation. The challenge that I had, well, before I get to that, as I told Deloitte I wanted to go to grad school, I had to go jump through some hoops, and a lot of the questions were around, what am I going to be able to do after grad school that I can't do now? And so part of what I said was, I'll be a better technical asset for the organization. I'll be able to work on these large scale projects. Like I was not in a technical role on this current FDIC project, but in the future, I was like, yeah, I can join technical things. And the chair of the department in 2009, when I was applying, loved software engineering, was all about it. Like that was his focus. Literally between when I applied to grad school and when I started in January, he left, somebody new came in, and they didn't really care about software engineering. And so that was a shift in terms of like the courses I wanted to take and that were offered. I actually took software engineering as an elective, and it was once a week for 2.5 hours. And the first week of the semester, there were 3 students, and I was like, all right, it's kind of small, but like, it's all right. The other 2 dropped it. And so for the rest of the semester, I had a one-on-one 2.5 hour lecture, which was like tough. And I want to say like week 4, I didn't do the readings, and it was one of the most awkward 2.5 hours of my life, because like there was nobody else to call.
There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah, yeah. And the initial syllabus for the class was like, you work with your classmates in teams of like 3 to 5 to build a software engineering project. Well, there was nobody else on the team, so it just became a lot more theoretical. And we did read The Mythical Man Month by Fred Brooks, which is an awesome book that I would definitely recommend. But that also meant like I didn't feel like I got the good software engineering experience. I ended up taking like a databases course in grad school, which was super helpful. I took information retrieval and like built a search engine. So like this was 2011, 2012, like I understood how Facebook's algorithm worked and how Google's algorithms worked and like how to tag people when you kind of get like little plus a few points in the back end so the thing bubbles up. Like there was a phase where I knew if I posted something on Facebook, almost every single person I knew would see it. And like every time I saw people in the real life, like, oh, I saw that stuff you've been posting on Facebook. And eventually that got weird enough where like I don't post anything on social media except for LinkedIn now. And I only do that for business purposes. But like I don't check social media. I've become a much bigger follower of Cal Newport, who actually was one of my grad school professors at Georgetown, about kind of like deep work and not focusing on social media and things of that nature.
That makes sense. Just kind of currently going through that process, looking at both consulting, but also possibly a more software-oriented technical trajectory.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that like when you guys are young, you should work to learn, and when you get older, you can work to earn. But the focus as you're weighing kind of different options, like where am I going to learn more? Am I going to get skills that I can bring with me for the rest of my career? You know, like I'm qualified to teach this class largely because of the skills I learned at Deloitte. And then I had this 5-year entrepreneurial journey. I learned so much. Like, yeah, I went bankrupt. I had no money. I had to like move into my parents' basement when I was 30. Like it was the dip. But I'm almost 37 on the other side of it. Like I know how to do a lot of stuff. I have a lot of relationships that I built and resources that I can share. And, you know, those skills and experiences that you acquire through the job, you get to keep for life. Like whether or not you stay there for 40 years and climb the corporate ladder, or you're there for 3 to 5 years. I think it's worth considering what are you going to learn, and then who are the people you're going to work with. I have found that people don't quit a company, they quit a manager. And it's usually that like relationship with your direct supervisor that may deteriorate over time, or maybe they leave and you get something new and you don't like them, whatever it might be. Like that's often a forcing function for why someone would leave a company. And it's worth noting that as you get older and you start to manage people, that take good care of them, you know, like listen and understand who they are outside of work and have a connection. Yeah, but I think there are pros and cons for both going into consulting and going into software engineering, both as right after undergrad, as well as maybe when you're 25, maybe when you're 30 or 35. Yeah. Let me bounce over to Alan. Alan, what other questions do you have, or things you want to know more about from my Deloitte experience?
Oh yeah, so like that educational development opportunity, were you like still working while you were taking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh.
And I was able to, I think when I started, I was still like a 9 to 5 every day, and I took like 5:30 or later classes. But by the last semester, I think one day I had negotiated I could just work from home, and I like deliberately took a 12:30 class so I didn't have to go to the office. And there's this element of like lifestyle design, of like being deliberate about what you want your days, your schedule to look like. And I found that I was over time able to make sure Deloitte knew I was really busy with grad school, and grad school knew I was really busy with Deloitte. And there was kind of this gray area in the middle where like I had some space to breathe and I wasn't super overwhelmed, but I didn't necessarily tell either side like, oh yeah, give me more work. Like I can definitely take on more work. And you know, I think in a similar vein, I would often like get home from work after grad classes, draft a bunch of emails, not push send. And I played on the club ultimate frisbee team at Georgetown. So I would like go to practice from 10 to midnight, get home by 12:30, shower, and like I couldn't fall asleep right away. So I might do a little bit of work. But then I would send emails at like 1:30 in the morning and then still be at my desk at 9 a.m. the next day. And that definitely led to the perception of, wow, Mike is working really hard. He's burning the candle on both sides. But like I had a nice dinner. I went and exercised. I did stuff, you know, that I enjoyed. It wasn't like I was grinding from 9 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. And I think, you know, having the self-care practices in there was important.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned that you worked on the campus recruiting team at University of Maryland and ultimately led it. And while I'm sure things have probably changed, processes might be a little bit different now. What advice would you have for students as they go through the recruiting process and trying to engage with those campus recruiters?
Great question. There are several people that you might interact with as you're applying to Deloitte or a big firm, whether via email or like a phone screen interview or like a career fair on campus. Or like when you go to an in-person interview, the like greeter there, and all the way back to the partner, whoever you interview with, every single one of them gets to chime in behind the scenes on whether or not they should offer you a job. And so keep that in mind, that you want to be kind and courteous and polite and respectful. You also want to have questions prepared to ask about the company, about what their experience was. Even if you already know the answer, you ask somebody else the question, still have questions. Because if you're like, awkwardly in the waiting room for 5 minutes, strike up a conversation with somebody, because one of the things they want to see is like, are these people personable? I love calling it the stuck in the airport question. Like, if you were supposed to fly somewhere with this person and the flight was delayed for 6 hours, would they want to spend 6 hours sitting next to you in an airport, or would they want to poke their eyes out? Or like would you bring them home for Thanksgiving dinner if like their family travel plans got canceled? And that is very much not the core competencies of doing the job, but is this an enjoyable human to collaborate with and like be on a team together? And that means a lot. And I would also encourage you to like research young alums from the past year or two that graduate from Georgetown that work at Deloitte. If you already know them, great. If you don't, reach out on LinkedIn over the summer or the next, couple of months, and just say, hey, take the informational interview resources, that I've shared. Hey, I'm interested in a career at Deloitte. Would love to learn how your experiences have been. If you have any advice for me. I did not know it at the time. I knew it for sure a year later that Mike Schuler got me the job at Deloitte. Like, he had the power in the background to be like, hey, Malloy is a smart dude. Like, he was in computer science classes with me. Like, we should give him a job. Like, yeah, I did well in the interviews, but like that overwhelming endorsement from somebody who's there. And even if the people that you do informational interviews with like aren't on the direct recruiting team, they're going to know who the recruiter is, or like who hired them, or somebody who's involved, that they can send a +1 email. It's not going to like fully get you the job, but it will definitely help move your resume through the process, and hopefully this gets you the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the interview too, you can also be like, I'm really excited about it. I talked to Joe and Shirley and Sarah, who all work here. They all had great things to say. One thing they didn't say is, and then I've got this other question I'd love to ask you about, but showing you've done your research. The only other place that I applied to my senior year was Accenture. I didn't even know what Accenture was. I just knew I needed to have a job interview practice before the Deloitte one. And like, I bombed the Accenture one. I like didn't do any research. I didn't know much. They asked me some questions. I was like, I don't know. And I watched, I was like, that was really bad. Like, I should probably like be prepared for similar questions at Deloitte and like know more about their website and stuff.
That makes sense.
Okay, and I guess I'm at a point where like I wouldn't know like all the specific details about like what this kind of career entails. So from I guess like your first day to like sending in your 6 weeks notice, what was something I guess you wish you could have done differently to like maximize your time at Deloitte?
Good question. I think the first year I could have done a lot more. Like I might just like self-describe myself as a slacker. Like, my assignment was like literally to make one PowerPoint slide in an 8 to 10 hour day. And there wasn't a lot of work, and I may have watched the entire series of Lost on my laptop in a private office. And I didn't like reach for more. I didn't volunteer to do things. And at year end, I like gave myself a 1. I was like, I'm great. My boss gave me a 3, and I was like somewhat mortified, very defensive, definitely had a big ego as like a 22-year-old. And I'd never like not been very good at things. And I will never forget this, because in the like evaluation conversation, I started getting defensive, and he said, Mike, just take a breath for a second. I don't want you to get defensive. And the reason I'm giving you this feedback, and some of it was like, you can try harder, you can take initiative, you can, go do other things. the reason I'm giving you this feedback is because I believe you can get better. I want you to improve and grow. And, it's when people stop giving you the feedback and stop coaching you, that they've given up on you and that they don't actually care. And they're like, yeah, this person sucks. They're not going to be an A player. Let's just it's not even worth having the difficult conversation. And I saw that happen to one of my coworkers who was perpetually late and kind of a mess and didn't have high quality work, and people just stopped giving him feedback, and they're like, well, Ashish did that one. So it is what it is. And I thought that was very helpful, and to listen, to receive the feedback, and to look for opportunities to grow outside of what your basic requirements are, and what's somebody in another department doing, or how could I help this firm initiative. I did lead volunteer days. We had an impact day every June 15th where we'd go do community service at the VA hospital that I helped organize, and helped organize a juvenile diabetes walk. Those weren't billable work or things of that nature, but they were helping my organization, project management skills, my communication. I was the captain of our kickball team, which I put on my little Deloitte resume. I was the king/president of the league, and my Deloitte girlfriend at the time was the queen/vice president of the league. And we had a lot of fun, and I'd send out big recap emails, and I honed these things. But I definitely think being deliberate about the skills you want to acquire, and then seeking out people who are way better than you with that stuff and spending time with them, and can you help them with a project? Can you write a first draft of a brief about this thing? Or yeah.
Thank you.
Kind of building off of what you just mentioned there in that last sentence or two, did you feel like you had a mentor at Deloitte, were able to seek one out, or is it something you wish you did more of?
Definitely. They do a really good job of, when you join, they give you a buddy who's a year older, just finished their first year as an analyst. And then you get, I'm going to say it was a counselor who was not involved with client service, but was involved with your annual goal setting, because you might switch projects throughout the year. And I was with Jared for 3 years. He was awesome. I think my 4th year, Jesse was the other guy, but didn't have as close of a bond with him. But Jared is still on the Christmas card list. Somebody who definitely helped me a lot. We used to always go to California Pizza Kitchen and get the Jamaican jerk barbecue pizzas together, and he'd print out the goals and where I was going to them, and I'd do some self-reflection before then. And he helped me with navigating grad school things, and he helped me too when that Deloitte girlfriend broke up with me, and I was kind of depressed for a while, and needed to kind of bounce back. And I mentioned, that first year I was a 3, but then I was a 1 the next year, and I got promoted. I got a 10% raise. I did great. And then I was a 2. And then I said at the beginning of the 4th year, I'm just trying to be a 3. I'm not trying to go above and beyond. I'm burnt out from grad school. I just want to make it a finish line. And that year I did less Deloitte work. Probably, yeah, I definitely did. I did less grad school work, and I did a lot more Waypoint Sunglasses entrepreneurship work. And so if you look at my grad school GPA, it was A minus, B minus, gentleman C, and you may graduate. And and I also realized halfway through that no one's ever going to see my grad school GPA. It's not a thing that goes on a resume. You just say my master's in computer science from Georgetown, and there's something to be said for that. And I will make a small plug. Don't go to grad school right after undergrad. Work for at least a couple of years. And don't go to grad school at Georgetown. Go get a second alumni network. I went to BC for undergrad. I'm not very involved at all at BC. I'm obviously highly involved at Georgetown. And this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone to grad school. And I think the main reason I went to was because I lived with my best friend from undergrad, who was in med school at Georgetown from 2008 to 2012. So I was in a studious environment and knew at some point I wanted a grad degree. So. What other questions can I answer for you guys?
I think you've kind of touched on most of my questions.
Yeah, all of mine basically got answered.
All right. Well, I'm curious then, what has been most useful for you guys, for each of you, that we've kind of talked through in this session?
For me, it's like, I guess, like what to expect from like your experiences, and I guess how I could like have certain things to watch out for if I like, cross those like similar bridges. And I too like am interested in entrepreneurship, and like what you have, like you're like 5 to 9, I guess, like doing sunglasses. I don't know, just gives me ideas.
Yeah, very cool.
I think one thing that stuck out to me was kind of with some organization, your ability to maintain a healthy life balance with all of the different commitments you had. It seemed like you continuously had 2 to 3 you were kind of building off of. And just a nice reminder that that is possible. But then
Yeah,
also hearing how you navigated your experiences with the tech background, maybe wanting to continue on with the tech background, but how you pivoted off of that.
for sure. And I also learned in grad school that I could do 3 balls, I couldn't do 4. And so like I remember it was like Jenny, Deloitte, Georgetown, Ultimate was like the 4 things, and the Jenny is no more. And that was the first one that kind of, after my first year of grad school, we broke up, and I kind of made the realization like I couldn't balance that with all the other things and kind of being a high performer across different areas. And so I didn't date for the next year and a half. I was just like, that wasn't, I was like, I have enough going on. I want to, commit to playing ultimate frisbee and training and doing that stuff. And as you're like juggling these balls with your career and your work life, like work is actually a rubber ball. Like you can drop it and it will still be there when you pick it up. Your health and your relationships, or like quality time with loved ones, is a glass ball. Like you have to prioritize that and like take time to rest and recharge. My mom passed away a couple of years ago, and I am grateful for all the time that we had together and being present there, and like don't take for granted the time you get with your parents. And yeah, it kind of sucked. I had to move home at 30, but I also got a lot more time with my parents. We had a dog who also passed away a couple years later, and got to spend a ton of extra time with her. So think about that, and be thoughtful too about the relationships in your life that are important, and like who do you enjoy spending time with, and like you get energized, you like leave a meeting or an interaction or like Friday night out, you're like, oh, that was so fun, versus do people drain you? Are they energy vampires, or is it like they're always gossiping or complaining or just like being negative? Like decrease the amount of access they have to your time and schedule. And that may be, people from home or family, or like there might be somebody who's just like always in a bad mood or woe is me, versus like, oh, everything's great. That was a temporary inconvenience is what my dad always says. Like, we can figure it out. You know, and I think as you develop too, there's this framework of like a plus, an equal, and a minus. And so Ken Shamrock, who is like a professional wrestler, an MMA guy, he like has this whole gym where he trains, MMA fighters. He's like, everybody has to have a plus, an equal, and a minus. In this case, like I'm the plus, somebody who's like way ahead of you that you want to kind of work towards what they're doing. You two would kind of be equals with each other. You're kind of sparring partners, or you're, running laps around the track, trying to get faster than each other. And then the important thing too is to have a minus, like somebody who is maybe a freshman, or in high school getting ready to go to Georgetown, that you can give advice to and kind of pay it forward. Because as you take what you've learned and then have to teach it or communicate it to somebody else, like you understand it better. It deepens your understanding because you're able to explain it, not just to somebody a couple years younger, but like to an 8-year-old, or your grandma, being able to articulate concepts in that way. I think it is helpful and will help with your kind of learning and skill acquisition. And ultimately too, it's just a job, like don't let it define you. I think I definitely dealt with depression as I was just going bankrupt and like shutting down a company. And I was like, it took a lot of work to realize that like a business can fail. Mike Malloy is not a failure. And to separate them, because for so long it was like the sunglasses was Mike was the sunglass company. And so realizing like you can do all sorts of stuff and it doesn't all have to work out. If it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And I have a lot of learnings, a lot of things I've done that have not worked out. But if you can pull a page out and kind of learn from it, then, it's a worthwhile experience. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate your time, and I hope this was helpful as you're considering Deloitte and other career options after graduation.